Kernel 6.12 has finally released. It has tons of new features, I would say, that are going to improve the Linux computing even more. And we're going to be looking at some of the new features that are in 6.12 and the future of 6.13 and beyond even maybe. Before this video starts, definitely give it a like and definitely subscribe to the channel. I would definitely appreciate it. So if you don't know, Kernel 6.12 did release today. For me, it's the 18th. For them, it's the 17th. They posted it. Yeah, it did release. And one of the first features that have came out in 6.12 is the Schedule EXT feature, which is kind of a scheduler that can do all types of different things for all types of different workloads. And one in particular is the Rust written LAVD kernel scheduler that is supposed to be trying to improve gaming performance. And as we can see here, they did a comparison against the regular schedule, I think it is, EEVDF. As we can see here, the 1% lows are incredibly much better versus the older version of the scheduler. As we can see here, I think this is maybe Tomb Raider or Far Cry, something. We can see here, it drops down to around like 33, while on EEVDF, it drops down to, I think that's 28, I think around, well, versus around the 30. And as you can see down here, 27, this one only drops down to like 32 or maybe 30. So as you can see, the 1% lows are a lot better. And I think one of the talks that was shown on here by Zhang Wu, he was talking mostly about how when you are looking at a frame time versus when you use the normal scheduler and then you use LAVD, when it came to the spikes in the frame timing, it was actually a lot better when using LAVD versus the normal schedule. And this kind of comes to like where, like on Arch, for example, I use System 76's scheduler for a better gaming performance, or people use game mode, which can improve some of those things, not all of what LAVD is trying to do, but game mode can usually improve some of the issues that games have on Linux. So this is merged, so if you're using kernel 6.12, you'll be able to use LAVD, which means you'll get better performance in games. One of the other really important things that is coming out in kernel 6.12 is the initial out-of-the-box support for Intel Xe2 graphics with Lunar Lake and Battlemage. So if you are going to get a Xe2 graphics card anytime, just know that you need to use kernel 6.12 or above to get a good initial out-of-the-box experience with those GPUs. And then one of the other weird things that got added, and I don't know why this took so long to get pulled into the kernel, this is to do with actually be able to see your reported fan speeds on Xe1 or probably Xe2 also ARC GPUs. So really odd that this took this long to get this feature just so you can see your reported fan speeds on an ARC GPU. And I know there's one other one that is missing also. I'm pretty sure it's like the temperature or something. That's not coming till kernel 6.13, which I think I do have it noted down in my notes about it arriving in 6.13, which I think is also quite funny that it's just like, it took this long for fan speed reporting to get put into an ARC GPU into the kernel. Quite odd, but glad it's here. That's really good. Another one is the new Snapdragon X1 laptop support with the ThinkPad T14S Gen 6 and the Microsoft Surface Laptop 7 hardware for these Qualcomm powered laptops, but various feature limitations remain. So if you do have these laptops, you should be able to use them now with kernel 6.12, but there is limitations. Now, I did not write down the limitations. It wasn't specified of what limitations it had, but if you do have these laptops, you should definitely give it a go with kernel 6.12 and see how these, I'm pretty sure these are ARM laptops, right? Because they're using Snapdragon ARM CPUs. So yeah, definitely give them a go and see how it goes in kernel 6.12. Two others that got added was the support, the controller support for the MSI Claw A1M, which you can see right here. So now that is supported in kernel 6.12 if you ever wanted to use controller support for that. And I'm pretty sure if you use distros like Bazzite, for example, they probably already pulled that in early for the Bazzite distro, so you can use that controller support on that handheld. So if you do have that handheld, you can use it on kernel 6.12, but you probably could already use it on Bazard anyways. And then another one is the 8BitDo Ultimate 2C wireless controller. That is now supported in kernel 6.12 also. So if you did buy this controller and you tried it out on Linux and it didn't work on maybe some default distros, maybe if you tried something like Nabara and it did work, that's good. But for the default distros, this controller is now supported in kernel 6.12. And if you are someone that is into drawing tablets and you have a specific drawing tablet that doesn't work at all on Linux, well, there is a new WACOM drawing tablet driver in 6.12. If you have a look through here, the HID subsystem updates have been merged. Notably, this time around are some new feature additions for the popular WACOM drawing tablet support. The WACOM drawing tablet driver for Linux kernel 6.12 now supports high resolution wheel scrolling, touch rings with relative motions, and supports for 2 touch rings compared to just 1 previously. The high resolution scrolling support in particular is a very nice addition for the WACOM driver. The HID subsystem has also seen a new HID over SPI driver for GITHUB devices, not following Microsoft's HID over SPI specification. This initial driver support is centered around the GITHUB GT7986U touchscreen, which if you do search that up, that is what that touchscreen looks like, which is specifically for, I'm guessing, drawing tablets. The HID multi-touch code has also added support for the Lenovo ThinkPad X12 Gen 2 keyboard portfolio, Intel ISH updates. The HID PlayStation driver with the DS4 controller will now update the rumble and light bar together, and also multi-touch support is added for the Lenovo Y9000P touchpad. So not just drawing tablets, there has been some other things with improvements to the DS4 controller, improvements to the ThinkPad X12 Gen 2 keyboard portfolio, the Lenovo Y9000P touchpad. All over with this one, lots of improvements when it comes to the HID subsystem. Very nice to see. Now when it comes to get some other things that have been improved, and we can see this post here from Phoronix, many Intel and AMD power management improvements for kernel 6.12. On the big set of power management updates for kernel 6.12 have landed. On the Intel side, there is now hybrid CPU capacity scaling support within the Intel P-State driver. This hybrid CPU capacity scaling support is particularly important for the forthcoming Intel Core Ultra 200 series, Lunar Lake laptops with a mix of P and E cores while lacking SMT support. As a reminder, I'll have Intel Lunar Lake Linux support in benchmarks later this month on Phoronix after pre-ordering a laptop due to the lack of cooperation from Intel. That's a rip that Intel didn't send him out the hardware to do the benchmarks on Phoronix, but he is going to do those benchmarks at some point. So that's really good to see that there is now hybrid CPU capacity scaling support within the Intel P-State driver. That brings lots of improvements. And then also on the Intel P-State driver front is Granite Rapids and Siro, I don't know how to say that word, forest support when functioning in the out-of-the-box mode. The Intel Idle driver also supports for upcoming Intel Xeon 6 Granite Rapids processors. The Intel RAP-L power capping code has also adds Arrow Lake U processor support. So that's really good if you've been looking for that. And the AMD power management has a lot too. The AMD P-State driver has reworked its calculations for AMD Boost and AMD Preferred Core detection. The runtime average power limiting code also has AMD family 1AH Zen 5 CPU detection that is needed for power monitoring of AMD Zen 5 processors. The Linux kernel 6.12 power management code is also dropping the old latency multiplier code that slows down the CPU frequency polling. So really good when it comes to the whole power management, how different CPU scaling work with different like P-State drivers on some newer CPUs that need support, like the Lunar Lake Ultra 200 series CPUs from Intel, and then the P-State driver and rework for the AMD power management. Really good to see that these have been merged into 6.12. So one that I find quite funny that has already arrived in 6.12 is a DRM panic message. So Windows, we have the whole blue screen of death thing. Well, Linux has never really had one, and this is mostly the closest that we can get to a screen of death screen that's going to show a QR code of where to go when it comes to support or reporting that certain bug. Like I said, this is specifically for DRM panic messages. Now, I wouldn't be confused with the whole DRM game management stuff that's on Windows. DRM is in the Linux kernel, and that's got to do with GPU drivers and all other types of things. Like it says here, the direct rendering manager, that's what DRM stands for in the kernel. When it comes to the panic stuff, we read through here, DRM is notably at the core level for adding optional support for for displaying QR code-based kernel error messages via the DRM panic infrastructure when running into a kernel error, rather than just a large wall of text that is often cut off by the display. Now, a convenient QR code is displayed that is much easier to snap a picture of rather than trying to immediately decipher all of the text. This QR code support for the Linux kernel is written in the Rust programming language. So if we do open up this image here and we have a look, we can see
Kernel panic, oh no!
Please reboot your computer, and it's a Linux logo and then a QR code, which I think is quite nice for one, because we're trying to make Linux better. I know a normal user isn't going to grab that QR code, but anyone that is like doesn't really want to read through different types of logs and go back through all of their previous boot logs and see what happened, they may not know how to do that either. They can easily take a picture of this QR code and then it will direct them to the right place, and it probably will provide them with a log already for them. And then not just that regular QR code, they were getting worked on by that, but the Red Hat engineer was also working on the AMD GPU driver side to bring the DRM panic support. So if you do have an AMD card and you get let's say some AMD GPU DRM kernel panic crash error, that QR code, DRM panic QR code will appear. And then same goes with NVIDIA. I'm pretty sure they're bringing support for that in 6.13, but that's only for the Novu driver, not for the proprietary NVIDIA driver. I'm guessing if NVIDIA wanted to support this, they would have to support it in their proprietary driver. Another amazing one, I think, is from the Codeweavers team, which if you don't know, Codeweavers, they work on Wine and they work with Valve, and one is working on better input device support for Proton gaming. The Wine developers at Codeweavers, who also collaborate with Valve on Steam Play's Proton, have been working to enhance input device support for Proton/Wine gaming, in particular for various gaming input devices that were never designed with Linux support in mind, and various nuances around properly supporting them under Linux with different limitations, from Xwayland to kernel driver handling. This person from Codeweavers, who also serves as the Proton janitor, that's quite funny, presented last week at the XOR Developers Conference in Montreal about the input device challenges and their hopes to enhance the support. He went over the various input device handling challenges, how the Wayland driver will improve some areas of support, the HID IO Revoc IO control being introduced in Linux 6.12, and other ongoing efforts as well as open issues. So if you are interested in about this whole input device support going into the kernel and improving it, there is a talk by that person on the XDC 2024 day 1 October 9th 2024 that I'll link down below for you guys to go and watch. But it's really good that at Codeweavers, they're really trying to improve device support handling with Proton gaming or Wine/Proton gaming and Xwayland stuff, just to try and improve the overall support for different input devices. Now, Linus himself did land a 2.6 performance improvement with a minor Linux kernel patch. Now, this isn't really that important. I'm guessing most of this performance improvement stuff is probably in specific workloads. So for us, we may see it in some things, but most things we're not going to see this 2.6 improvement. As we read here, Linus Torvalds merged a patch on Wednesday that he authored that with reworking a few lines of code is able to score a 2.6 improvement within Intel's well-exercised will-it-scale per-thread ops benchmark test case. The patch written by Linux creator Linus Torvalds in turn is based on an earlier patch proposed by the kernel developer Josh. The intent is on avoiding the use of barrier_no_spec within the 64-bit copy from user function, something I do not understand. Linus Torvalds explains in the 20-line kernel patch, the barrier_no_spec and 64-bit copy from user is slow. Instead, use pointer masking to force the user pointer to all ones for an invalid address. The kernel test robot reports a 2.6 improvement in the per thread ops benchmark, with the copy from user being used to copy a block of data from user space to kernel space. It will be interesting to see if this minor optimization ends up having an impact in other synthetic or real-world workloads. In any event, every little optimization to the kernel adds up, especially when this optimization selection as a result of avoiding the overhead of barrier no spec, preventing speculative execution past the barrier as part of the Spectre mitigations that have been oh so costly over the years. So if you do get kernel 6.12, I would definitely try and just test things against 6.11 and see if there's any improvements with this 2.6 performance improvement by Linus Torvalds. So what I'm most excited about is what's next in the next release of the Linux kernel, and that is 6.13. And one of the new features that I'm pretty not excited about, because I don't have an RX 7000 series card, but it's more excited about with other users that are able to come over to Linux and they will be disappointed because of a certain feature being missing. But now that feature won't be missing. And it's quite funny, as this patch didn't come from the AMD developers. This came from a random, probably not random, but a person that's got nothing to do really with AMD development. I'm guessing this person just proposed a patch and now it's going into kernel 6.13. And it's pretty important because it allows controlling for 0 RPM feature for the Radeon RX 7000 series GPU. As I heard, a lot of people really wanted this feature in their RX 7000 series GPUs. So as you can see here, sent out yesterday was an AMD GPU / AMD KFD kernel driver pull request within the last few feature additions and patches slated for the upcoming Linux 6.13 kernel merge window. Alongside other AMD kernel graphics driver updates, the new driver code with Radeon RX 7000 series RDNA 3 graphics card will finally allow controlling the 0 RPM fan feature under Linux. With this latest round of AMD GPU updates for Linux 6.13 are a number of DCN 3.5 and DCN 4 display fixes, various 8K display fixes, OLED fixes, code cleanups, and other mostly maintenance work. For end users, one item worth mentioning though is the user control for the 0 RPM feature on graphics cards within the SMU13 IP. The AMD 0 RPM fan feature allows for the graphics card's fan to be completely stopped when idle / below set temperature thresholds. Within the Radeon software for Windows driver, the 0 RPM fan control can be toggled via a GUI option, but not so under Linux until now. With Linux 6.13, new SYSFS entries are being added to allow users to toggle whether they want to enable this feature or not, and to specify the temperature threshold for when 0 RPM should be engaged. So this is really freaking good, that if you are RX 7000 series owner and you've been wanting 0 RPM, well, it's now available. And I know that the project Lacked, they had a recent release, which I'm going to do a video about this software. They added the feature early for the 0 RPM mode setting, which is a GUI overclocking tool for changing power profiles or underclocking, undervolting, changing your fan curves and stuff. And they added the 0 RPM mode for RDNA 3, but they say here you have to wait for 6.13 to arrive. So really good that this feature is finally coming to RX 7000 series owners. Now, one important feature that I've seen so many times on Reddit of people who have a AMD card and they're like,
oh god, why is my games performing lower than they are on Windows?
or like, why is my FPS so bad on Linux gaming with my AMD card? For some reason it's not being used, or there's specific little issues with, because like power management's wrong, the VR, my screen's like flickering so much. And it's because of the power profile that is set by default on Linux is the wrong power profile. And for some reason, it doesn't switch over properly over to the correct one when you are playing video games. It's kind of odd. Like when I tried one game, it would activate it, but on other games, it wouldn't change it. So this is going to change it to a more aggressive power, which is the full screen 3D power profile, which allows the GPU to use basically all of its power and all of its clock speeds properly, so then you get a better experience when playing games on Linux. As it says here, it looks like for the upcoming Linux 6.13 kernel cycle, there could be a nice performance boost for AMD Radeon discrete graphics cards, with the AMD GPU kernel driver poised to set more aggressive power heuristics by default. A change queued up last week by AMD GPU driver maintainer Alex will now default to the full screen 3D workload profile for discrete GPUs, and AMD APUs within the integrated graphics will continue to use the default boot up power profile, but discrete graphics cards will be running in the full screen 3D. So I wonder why AMD APUs are not going to be able to use the full screen 3D power profile by default. That's a bit odd. Maybe there's some issues with that. Maybe that's why it's just chosen as the boot up profile. But if you do have a discrete GPU, you will be able to use the full screen 3D power profile by default now. And that means for any future users that are going to use an AMD card and they come over from Windows to Linux and they are running kernel 6.12 or above, they're going to experience a good experience when it comes to playing games on Linux Linux because they won't have to grab an overclocking tool to change the power profile properly. And there is another one. There is AMD 3D V-Cache Optimizer driver to be merged for Linux 6.13. Last month, AMD Linux engineers posted patches for a 3D V-Cache Optimizer driver for Linux that allows the user to communicate their cache versus frequency preferences depending upon workload. And for the 3D V-Cache processors where some CCDs have a larger cache but not all, that driver is now ready for appearing in the upcoming Linux 6.13 kernel. The Ryzen X3D processors with 3D V-Cache for some core complex dies, but not all, can now have a bias set under Linux whether it should be optimized for frequency mode or cache mode. So that's really cool. If you are looking for improvements with the 3D V-Cache on Linux, this is now going to be available in Linux 6.13. And back to the DRM panic, I was talking about how NVIDIA, not necessarily NVIDIA, but there was some developers that were going to support the DRM panic support for NVIDIA GPUs, but really it's only for the Novu driver. So if you sit right here, Linux 6.13 bringing DRM panic support to NVIDIA, which I thought it was like, I was like, oh, okay, it's going to bring it to the proprietary drivers, but no, it's only for the open source Novu kernel driver. So Friday saw a final round of DRM's next feature updates ahead of the upcoming Linux 6.13 kernel merge window. The DRM panic code continues to enhance for improving this blue screen of death-like experience on the Linux desktop. The DRM panic code that has come together the past few kernel cycles allows for a blue screen of death-like experience in the event of running into kernel panics. With this week's DRM full, there is now DRM panic support for the open source NVIDIA Novu kernel driver for NV50 GPUs in Nulla. The NV50 GPUs originate all the way back in the GeForce 8 series. So basically any NVIDIA GPU in the past decade and a half on the Novu driver should now be able to enjoy this DRM panic support. So crazy that they've gone all the way back to NV50. That's quite wild, I would say, but really good that like for the Novu side of things, the DRM panic is now supported. And some other things like platform profile support coming for newer DELL/Alienware laptops with Linux 6.13. Select newer DELL/Alienware laptops with a WMAX thermal interface will see ACPI platform profile support now exposed with the upcoming Linux 6.13 cycle. Newer Dell laptops like the Alienware X series, Alienware M series, and Dell's G series laptops featured this new WMAX thermal interface. This interface was reverse engineered by open source developers to enhance the Linux support for these laptops, but the pending kernel documentation on the Dell WMAX interface. With the driver patch now queued within platform drivers for next branch, the platform profile support is added for the WMAX interface present on those Dell/Alienware laptops. With the Alienware Command Center not being available for Linux, the platform profile support on these laptops hasn't been available outside of Windows until now. So that's really good that some developers decided to reverse engineer the platform profile support for these laptops. And I really do hope that, like, you know, it's kind of odd that like Dell, when you go to their website to buy a laptop, like they support Linux, like they'll get Ubuntu installed on the laptop, I'm pretty sure. You can buy a laptop with Ubuntu installed on it, I'm pretty sure. But for some reason, they don't bring over these features, which is quite odd that Linux developers have to reverse engineer this to bring it over. It's still great that we're getting this, but it's reverse engineered. I wish it was like, you know, Dell or Dell/Alienware could actually bring this support. That would be really good. And if you own a Corsair Void headset, well, this driver is now going to be supported in Linux 6.13. For those that happen to have a Corsair Void headset or looking for a new gaming headset, this upcoming holiday season, the upcoming Linux 6.13 kernel cycle is expected to merge a new driver for these wired and wireless PC gaming headsets. Back in August, I wrote about an open source developer working on the Corsair Void headset driver for Linux. That HID driver is now queued up within the HID subsystem for next Git branch, meaning that is now expected to be merged for the Linux 6.13 merge window opening up in late November, unless any unforeseen issues arise with the new driver code. The Corsair Void headset aimed to deliver great sound quality, maximum comfort, RGB lighting, and other features for these headsets that retail at $80+ USD. The Corsair Void headsets can now be found at Amazon. With this Corsair Void driver, that headsets under Linux can now support battery status reporting, side tone setting, physical microphone location reporting, headset and receiver firmware version reporting, built-in alert triggering, and USB wireless status handling. So that's really good if you are looking for a Corsair Void Pro wireless, Void Elite wireless, or Void Elite wired headsets, and you had issues with it, either, oh, I can't see my battery status or something. Well, these headsets are now going to be supported in Linux 6.13. And Intel begins working on the next gen Xe3 graphics with 6.13. So XE2 hasn't even came out yet. I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be coming out like this month or next month or something. It's supposed to be shown off, and that's why 6.12 has got the XE2 graphics ready for XE2, but they're already working on XE3 graphics. So quite insane that they're already working on this, like already. They're already just going into the next round of next Intel Arc GPUs or integrated GPUs also. And the last one that I talked about at the start of the video for 6.12 was about exposing the GPU package temperature in the Arc GPUs. So now you got the fan speed in 6.12, and then the user's going to have to wait another maybe month or two for the GPU package temperature to arrive in 6.13. So great to see that Intel is bringing, you know, the required things so a user can actually look at like what the GPU is reporting. But yeah, still really good to see. If you are a user who has an Arc GPU by 6.13, you should have most things. I'm pretty sure the GPU package temperature and the fan speed is enough to know like what your GPU is doing. Probably there's some other things left also that are required maybe, but if you have an Arc GPU, these are great features. And that is the end of this video. If you enjoyed all of these things that are coming in 6.12, all the things that are coming in 6.13, I would definitely give it a like and definitely subscribe to the channel. I would definitely appreciate it. And thank you to my supporters. I appreciate you guys. I'll show a screenshot of you now. Like I said, I really do appreciate you guys giving me money every single month. And I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.